Hello there, it's Codoking here, and today we're gonna go ahead to our fourth lecture for Python for beginners. And in this lecture, we're gonna learn about if-else statements. So if-else statements include if statements, else statements, and elif statements, and we're gonna understand all of these right now. So now that we have our IDE open, we can stop picking our nose and put our hands in our keyboard and start coding. So suppose you've got a program that says x equals 2 and then it prints x is greater than 1. Now let's run this program and see what happens. Alright, it's working just fine. It says x is greater than 1. Now the problem is that if I write x equals 0 and run it and see what happens, it's still gonna say that x is greater than 1. Now there's no way for us to check whether or not x is greater than 1, at least not right now. Now we can use some kind of conditional statements that will check that very thing that we are having a problem with. So we're gonna write if. So if x is greater than 1, this thing will happen. Now if we run it, we're gonna see some errors. So as you see, indentation errors appear. So what is an indentation error? So in Python, when you're gonna write something, what happens is that you have semicolons, and after that you gotta write everything below that, but whatever you wanna keep inside the conditional statement after the semicolon, it must have a tab equivalent of space before that. So we're gonna click here and click tab, and we get this amount of space. Now we still have an error over here, and the error is appearing because we don't have x declared here yet. We are saying x is greater than 1, but where the hell is x? We don't have any variable x. So I'm going to declare x as an input. So I'm going to write x. Now I want to enter it as an integer, so I'm writing int, and then I'm going to write input, and I'm going to write a piece of text over here, and this text is going to be enter an integer for x. Let me put it in quotation marks. Alright, now let's run this up and see what happens. Alright, it says enter an integer for x. We're gonna enter 4. So 4 is greater than 1, it prints 1. Now let's run it again and see what happens. Enter integer for x, and we are gonna enter 1. So 1 is not greater than 1, and it isn't printing anything at all. So that's great. Now we don't have this problem anymore. However, what if I want it to print something else? Like I want to have this text printed, print x is 1 whenever x is equal to 1. The solution for this is pretty simple. I can write another if statement and write x equals 1. So one of the things is that you can notice that we have two equals back to back over here and not just one equal sign. So one equal sign will mean that we are assigning the value of 1 to x. However, we're not doing that, we're comparing that. We're saying that if x equals 1, then something else will happen. So because of that, I have to write two equals back to back. Now let's write print x is 1. So let's try it again. Now let's try it for 2. x is greater than 1. That's perfect. Now let's do it for 1. X is 1. That's perfect. Now one of the problem with writing two if statements is that it's gonna check both of them. What I mean by that is that the program is gonna start, it's gonna read the value of x, which in this case could be 1 or 2. So suppose we get the value of 1. So it reads it 1, it goes through the first line of code over here, and it says that, okay, so x is not greater than 1, and then it goes over here and it's like, okay, x is actually 1, so we're gonna print this. However, what if we have x equals 4? So if we have x equals 4, it's gonna start here and check if x is greater than 1. So it's gonna satisfy this condition and it's gonna write this whole thing. However, it's also gonna check this condition again. Now, it doesn't make sense for us to check two conditions because it's gonna be lengthy, and sometimes you don't want the program to check two conditions. So because of that, what we can do is, instead of writing if, we can write elif. So elif is basically, if this happens, that's good. Now, if this doesn't happen, this other thing will happen. So elif, it means that else, if this happens, this is gonna happen. That's cool. Now we're gonna learn about the else. So when we write else, we do it the same way, and we can write print x is less than 1. So if x is not greater than 1, if x is not equal to 1, it will be definitely less than 1. So else means that if neither of the other conditions that we had before, like you can have a lot of elifs over here, okay? So if neither of this elif or any other elif, and even the if that we had, is true, what's gonna happen is that it's gonna check nothing at all, and it's gonna be like, any other possible solution will print this. So in this case, any other possible solution will give x is less than 1. So we're gonna run this and see that after we put 0, we get x is less than 1. So yes, we get the else statement right. So now we have understood that these symbols are very important, and these are basically comparison operators. So when we want to compare two numbers, we're gonna write some signs in order to compare it. So if they are equal, it's gonna be 2 equals. If they're greater than, it's gonna be the sign greater than. If they're less than, it's gonna be the sign less than. So let me write them as a comment for you. So greater than, we just put the sign greater than. So less than, we're gonna put the sign less than. And equals, we're gonna put 2 equals. Now what if it is either equal to or less than? So it means that if we write, for example, this, what's gonna happen is that if x is greater than or equal to 1, it's gonna print this whole thing. And this is not gonna be printed because this is as elif. So if this happens, this won't be actually executed. So in this case, if we write 1, it will print x is greater than 1. Even though x is not greater than 1, we can write is greater than or equal to 1. In this case, it's gonna be, and because of this symbol, it's gonna check whether or not it's 1 or greater than 1. So let's run it just to see what happens. So we gotta enter our number. I'm gonna enter 1. So x is greater than or equal to 1. I put some space over here, just forget about it. Now let's write some other number. Let's write 3, and yes, x is greater than or equal to 1. That's perfect. Now I don't want this. Now back to understanding these symbols. Greater than is greater than, less than is less than, equals is two equal signs, and then we have greater than or equal. So in this case, we write greater than and the sign equal. So we can do also less than or equal. It's gonna be similarly the sign. Now let's go to our example. So I have two many projects here for you, and the first project is about making a sculptor. So you enter your power level, and based on that it's gonna say which character of Dragon Ball Z you are. So the lowest one is obviously Yamcha, then we got Roshi, then we got Gohan, and then Vegeta, and then Goku. I actually wanted to put Vegeta a bit higher, but yeah, everybody knows that Goku is stronger. Now, if you want to fight in the comments and go Super Saiyan over there, go ahead. So the second project is basically create a stone, paper, scissors kind of game. So it's gonna ask the input for the first player and the input for the second player, and based on their decisions it's gonna give you an output. So for example, if player 1 inputs scissors and player 2 inputs stone, it's gonna say player 2 wins. It's gonna be very easy, but I hope that you can make it. And I'm not gonna show it to you right now, but I'm gonna have the solution in the description so that you guys can figure it out on your own, and if you don't, you can visit my link. Alright, so and this example over here is something that we're gonna do together right now. However, again, I want you guys to try it on your own. Okay, so let's write the prompt. It's gonna be power level. So I'm gonna call the variable power level. I'm gonna write it as an integer, and I'm gonna write it as an input. So I'm gonna write enter power level. Now I'm gonna write the if conditions. So if power level is 0 to 500, so I'm gonna be like, if power level is greater or equal to 0 but less than 500. So how we include two conditions together? We write and power level is less than 500. Now we can print Yamcha. Now we can write the other statements as elif, else, or elif, your power level is greater than or equal to 500 and it is less than 10,000. Then we're gonna print Roshi. Now I want to put Master Roshi because let's put some respect on his name, okay? Now elif power level is greater than or equal to 10,000 and power level is less than 20,000. We're gonna print Gohan. Let's write another elif. Power level is greater than or equal to 20,000 and power level is less than 50,000. You're gonna print Vegeta. Now for any other input it should work. We can write just else because any other input over 50,000 it's gonna be Goku, and I don't care about the upper limit over here. Is more than 50,000. Okay, so we're gonna go print Goku. Now let's execute this code and see what happens. Now over here we still got the first code. I'm just gonna skip through this. Okay, so I entered the power level 56 and it says Yamcha. Yes, pretty accurate. So I entered 6 and now enter the power level. I'm gonna enter 30,000 and see what happens. So 30,000 give Vegeta. So we got Vegeta. So that should work for every input that go through, and this is how you do an if and else statement. So I taught you about and I'm also gonna talk you about or. So here I'm gonna write and or. So what is and or? So when you are gonna include two statements and it's gonna check if both statements are correct, it's gonna say and. So when you write or, it's gonna check if one of the two statements is correct. Then the program will run. For example, if let's do x equals 60, and I can write if x is greater than 50 and if x is also greater than 60, it's gonna print out huge. Let's see what happens if we run this code. So if we run this code and try to see what happens, skim through the first lines of codes, nothing happens at all. We don't get the printing statement that we wanted. We don't get huge. So if we don't get huge, it is because x is greater than 50. However, it's not greater than 60. So this AND condition is not satisfied and means that it has to be both. Now what if we write OR? So with OR, we can check it again. And it says huge. And it's saying huge because here it checks whether or not it's 50 or 60. So either way, it's gonna print something. If this happens, it's gonna print huge. If this happens, it's gonna print huge. Do subscribe. I don't wanna beg for it, but man gotta do what he gotta do to get some subs. As long as it's not that questionable, of course. Alright, stay safe, stay cool, and do subscribe. Have a good one.